Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Trevor with Maker Experiment, and today I am going to be talking about must-have tools and supplies for laser engraving and cutting. The main focus of this video is to talk about the tools and supplies that I use in projects as well as machine maintenance, and give you some insight into what tools may be useful and which ones are absolutely necessary if you're going to be operating and using a laser engraving machine. Now I've split these into 4 different categories. The first one is different tools that you're going to need. This could be for maintenance or for projects. The second one is going to be laser maintenance items. The third one is going to be project supplies. And the fourth one is going to be cleaning supplies that are both project and machine related. So let's kick it off by talking about the tools. There are a few different tools that I find useful, but not all of them are going to be necessary. The only absolutely necessary tool that you're going to need are Allen wrenches. So the set I have is both SAE and metric. I just picked it up at Home Depot. The reason that this is absolutely necessary is a lot of the bolts on the machine itself that you're going to have to loosen or take off for machine maintenance are going to require the Allen key set. It's best to have a set that covers both. That way you will definitely have whatever Allen wrench is going to fit your machine. Now let's talk about some of the tools that I find useful, but these are not necessary at all. You don't have to have these to do anything on the laser. I just find these useful while I'm doing projects. So the first one is just a utility knife. So the reason that this is helpful is just when you're unpacking materials. Most of them come in sealed boxes. You don't need it, but it's nice to have. Next up is art knives. So I usually have maybe 3 or 4 of these around the shop in different spots. I mainly use them to pick out small pieces during laser cutting. Occasionally I'll be cutting something that's very small, so I use these to just go back through and just punch them out. The blades are really small and they can get into pretty much any part that I need. They're also useful for cutting smaller things where the utility knife may be a little too large. The next tool is a dial caliper. So to be honest, I don't use mine all that often, mostly because the battery died and I haven't replaced it yet. This is useful for figuring out your material thickness for both your design process as well as your machine. Some machines come with autofocus and they require you to know the material thickness. This is a great tool for figuring that out to the decimal point. A tool that I use very often with engraving mugs is going to be a fabric ruler. This is going to be useful for measuring cylindrical objects because it bends and conforms to any surface. So I will say that if you're going to be engraving mugs, this is pretty much a must-have. The next tool is going to be a small set of pliers. So these are useful for putting on keychains and other small items that your hands are just going to get tired of doing. Again, not a must-have, but they are nice to have for certain projects. So next up is a scraper and a plastic razor blade. So if I take the cap off, it's just a piece of plastic that acts just like a razor blade does. The scraper itself is great for applying tape and other items to get it nice and tight with no bubbles. And then the plastic razor blade is great at peeling paper off of acrylic. If you have really small pieces of acrylic that have been cut out, this is great for getting underneath of the paper without scratching the acrylic. In the past, I used to use an art knife or a razor blade of some kind, and it would always scratch the surface. This has eliminated that problem for me. And then the last tool, which you may argue is not actually a tool, is rubber bands. Rubber bands are actually great at clamping small parts that I'm making, so little boxes and things like that. If a wood clamp will not fit, rubber bands are a great substitute. The next set of supplies that I want to talk about is actually going to be for laser maintenance. So just like any other machine, a laser has to be maintained, it has to be cleaned, and everything else in order to operate efficiently. So the items in this category are going to be must-have items. Now there are substitutes that you can use in place of the ones that I'm going to be talking about, but these are items that you're going to need. So first up is going to be white lithium grease. So the grease is actually useful on the gantry part of this. So you'll put the grease on the inside, move the head along the gantry track, and spread the grease around the entire axis. This will keep all of those slides lubricated and working properly. In my case, my machine came with a little syringe. that has the white lithium grease in it. This is good for about 3 or 4 uses, and then you're going to have to get more. You can either go through the laser supplier, or you can go to somewhere like Home Depot or Amazon, get some white lithium grease, fill this back up, and you're going to be good to go for a long time. Next up is going to be cleaner for both your lenses and your mirrors. So there are 2 of these that I've used in the past. One is a spray, and the second one is more of an eye drop consistency, where you're just going to drip it onto the paper that you're going to use, and then clean it with that. To go along with those cleaners, you're going to either need Q-tips, or you're going to need these laser cleaning cloths. So these are a tissue paper type material. They're very thin, but they don't leave any lint or anything on the lenses or the mirrors. And the last item that's not a must-have, but it is very useful, is going to be a compressed air spray. So this is meant for electronics, such as cameras and video equipment, as well as for lasers. So this is going to be useful for getting dust out of spots that you can't actually reach. Now again, this isn't a have-to-have, but it is very handy. So next up, I want to talk about project supplies. So these are going to be things that I use during my projects and that I have found useful while I'm working. And depending on the types of projects that you're going to do, these may or may not be useful. Now these first few things are actually going to be things that are great for every project. So no matter what you're doing with the laser, these are great things to have and are not going to be project specific. So the first up is going to be the gloves. So for me, these are a must-have because no matter what I'm working with, it's going to be dirty. And if I'm going to glue it together, I inevitably end up with glue on me. So it's always nice to have a pair of these around when I'm doing projects or when I'm cleaning them up, because not only do they keep my hands clean, but they also keep the project material clean. Next are going to be masking tape and painter's tape. So you really only need one of these. But I do find that it's easier to find the masking tape in a wider roll. So for sheet materials that I use, I tend to use the larger roll of masking tape first. And I only really need the painter's tape if I'm trying to hold something down or if I'm doing something small. Now the masking tape is great for if you're going to be engraving material. You just put a piece of masking tape over top of it. Then while it's engraving, it keeps all of the dust, debris, and residue from the machining process away from the actual face of the material. That way when you're done, you can just peel this masking off and the finish is nice and clean. Next up is just markers. I have them everywhere. So I use this to write on material scraps that I have, just so I know what that material was with a quick look, instead of having to peel off any films or maskings. I also use it just to jot things down while I'm working on either cardboard or scraps that I have around, because I don't always have a pad of paper. Next up is going to be material swatches. So this one is a swatch of mirror acrylic that was given to me by a supplier. They don't always give these out, but what I do end up doing is if I order a material, and this is mostly pertaining to acrylic itself, I will cut a small square off of that material and lay it to the side and then write on it or engrave on it what it is. That way, if I'm showing a client material choices, or if I need to remember what I ordered in the past, I can just look really quick at the swatch and I'll know exactly what I had. So I will say that this one may be a must-have if you're like me and you try to stay organized. And the last part of this category is going to be different types of adhesives. So the first one, and the most simple that almost everybody has in their shop, is going to be CA glue or super glue, depending on who you talk to. So I mainly use these for wood and other items that need to be assembled that are not acrylic. For acrylic, I'm going to be using some different stuff that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But as far as CA glue goes, I usually have a few different types of consistency, as well as the accelerator. So the accelerator is really good at drying quickly, but it's not meant for every single project. I will say that if you're working with painted items, do not use the accelerators, mainly because they contain acetone and that will ruin the paint job. If you are working with painted items, just use the CA glue by itself and let it cure to its normal dry time, and you'll have a clean finish. For acrylics, I use 3 different types of adhesives. The first and probably most common is going to be Weld On 3. Now, whether you get weld on 3 or weld on 4, it doesn't really matter. This one has a very liquid consistency, kind of just like water. For this one, I actually have a separate application part that looks like this. And this just has a needle point where I can easily drip this onto whatever I need, and I don't have to worry about spilling the entire container. I usually use this if I'm going to be assembling acrylic that's not really going to be seen. So this solvent basically welds the acrylic together with a chemical reaction, and sometimes that chemical reaction will have a surface finish that isn't always pleasing to the eye. So if I'm really concerned about how it looks in the end, this one probably isn't the one I'm going to use. So if I'm concerned about the surface finish and I'm going to be using some type of liquid adhesive, I stick to the SciGrip 16. So this is a bit thicker. I would say the equivalent to the normal glue would be like an E6000 or something of that nature. So this one flows a lot slower and has a lower viscosity. The downside to this one is it's not super easy to use because you can end up getting more adhesive out than what you need. So this one's going to take a little bit of practice, but it is great for assembling acrylic where you want a clean finish. Now, my favorite type of adhesive for acrylic is actually this double-sided tape. So this one is the 3M 467 Mp Adhesive. This is actually specifically made for signage. If you've watched any of my other videos where I'm making a sign project out of acrylic, I pretty much use this exclusively. Now it is on the expensive side. I think I paid maybe $300 or $400 for this roll, and I've had this roll for probably the last 6 months. Now, if I was a sign shop that did, 5-6 signs a day, this would have ran out already. But I probably made 30 to 40 signs with this. So yes, it is an expensive product up front, but it's going to make assembling signs a very efficient process and will reduce your overall labor time. So although it has a high cost for the material itself, down the line, it's actually going to probably decrease your cost when it comes to assembly and work time. Now, depending on where you order your acrylic from, you can actually get this applied to the acrylic when you order it. I know that Johnson Plastics does this. I don't know of any other suppliers at the moment. So you can pay per piece of material that you are buying. And when you do that, it's a lower cost when you're applying it to the single sheet than buying the whole roll at once. But the price per square foot is much higher than if you did buy the entire roll. Now, the last part I want to talk about are the cleaning supplies that I use during my projects, as well as my machine maintenance and other items. So the first up, and this is a must-have for me, is going to be the shop towels. So I usually have 5 or 6 rolls of these at a time, and I have one on either side of my shop. These are great for wiping down pieces after they've been machined, as well as when I'm cleaning the machine or cleaning mugs. Overall, this is a shop item that's pretty much a must-have for any maker that I know and that I've talked to. I think everybody has these. But the best part to me about this specific type that I get from Home Depot is just that it is lint-free. So if I'm wiping something down, it doesn't leave any trace of it. So they're great for cleaning up projects. Next up are the magic erasers. So whether they're the generic kind or the name brand kind, it doesn't matter. But these are great for cleaning the machine itself, as well as some projects where residue and things are tougher to get off, such as laminates and sometimes mugs or anodized materials. So it's always good to have a couple of these laying around just in case. Now the next item that I have are acrylic cleaners. So these are actually sold as the set of 3, and they're the Novus acrylic cleaners. So the first one is going to be the plastic clean and shine. So this is kind of the at the end to buff it out. The number 2 is going to be a fine scratch remover. And then number 3 is going to be a heavy scratch remover. Now I don't always have to use these, but they are nice to have around. There can be the occasional item that I'm working with or acrylic that I'm working with where these don't completely fix the scratches or whatever that I'm doing. And it's usually because the scratch is just too deep. But those are nice to have around if you're going to be working with acrylic. And the last item that I have is going to be ZEP 505. So for me, I use this to clean up mugs as well as parts of the metal on the machine. And it has worked on the honeycomb vector table in small sections. Now, if you're trying to clean the whole vector table, that's a completely different story. But I've seen people use Simple Green for that, as well as other industrial cleaners. But for projects and cleaning up dirt and grime on the machine itself, this is going to be a great item to have. So that's going to do it for the items that are must-haves or are helpful in my shop. Now there are still other things around the shop that I end up using during the process of making projects, but I feel that the items that I covered are a pretty comprehensive list of the things that I use. Now you may find things along the way that are great to use and have in the shop. So if there are items that you use in your shop that you think that I would find useful, leave a comment below and let me know so that not only I can try them out and see if I like them, but also be able to share them with other laser users that I know. I want to thank you for checking out the video. If you have ideas for future videos that you want to see, please leave a comment below and let me know what those would be. I'm always looking for new video ideas. That would be helpful to the maker community. So if you have an idea for a video or if you want to collaborate on a video together, let me know in the comments below and we'll see what we can do. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you did enjoy it. Check the links in the description below for what these items are and where you can get them. Most of the ones in the description are going to be Amazon affiliate links. So if you decide to purchase them, I do get a small percentage back, which helps me continue to run the channel and put out new content. And if you haven't yet, go check out my Instagram @MakerExperiment, where I share different projects and things that I'm doing along the way. And be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so that you know when I post new videos and when they come out. I typically try to release videos on Tuesdays at noon Pacific time. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.